Hey there guys, it's Pineapple and you already know what day it is of the week, so it's time to talk about this week's new chapter of My Hero Academia spoilers. And sorry for being a little later than usual, I had some technical problems going on with my computer, but those are seemingly fixed now, at least enough for me to get this video out. So let's talk about everything going on in My Hero Academia chapter 382, and thank you to Rukasu, Justice, and Dabi's Pole Dance for all the information that they have on Twitter, and you can follow me on Twitter at Vocal Pineapple or Vocal Pineapples, depending on which of my two accounts that you want to follow. So chapter 382 is titled I Won't Let You Get Away, and it's actually really interesting how we get to that point and who says that in this chapter, but let's get there. The chapter begins with Hawks and All for One realizing that the current situation hasn't gotten as good for the villains or bad for the heroes as it could get, specifically because Toga still hasn't used her full power. This is pretty much showed to us on the page with All for One and Hawks on two different sides of the page thinking the exact same thing, where Hawks is like, man, things haven't gotten as bad as they technically could get for us, and All for One thinking, ooh man, things are only about to get better when Toga finally starts using 100% of her actual ability. And what is All for One referring to when he says that Toga actually hasn't used her full power? Well, we find out really quickly because that's when she starts making clones of Shigaraki, Dabi, and All for One, who we see in the crowd of Twice clones, and those are a really dangerous trio of clones to make. On the next page, we see that Shigaraki's clone tries to use Decay, but nothing actually happens. And he squints one of his eyes, looking rather confused at the fact that his Decay didn't work. And at the same time as him trying to use his Decay, we see instead of the ground just completely crumbling away, it begins to grow out of the ground and fly into the air as Pixie Bob uses her quirk to send that Shigaraki clone flying and hopefully collapse him with her tidal wave of mud. It's here where we see Froppy, Jiro, and Ochako running, and Tsuyu says that she has a hypothesis. If Toga transformed into the other league members at the start and made clones of them, things would already be over. There wouldn't really be all this battling going on. If that's how everything was going to go, Toga already could have just transformed into Twice and ended this battle immediately. But since that's not what she did, there has to be a condition at play here, something that's not going according to Toga's plan. And that's where all the work that the heroes did before this war arc to really share their intel and discuss everything that they've learned so far really starts to come into play. As Tsuyu says that this condition likely has to do with what Toga told Ochako in the last war about using the quirks of people that she loves. Clones created by Toga must still follow that rule, and since she doesn't love the league members enough, she can't actually use her quirks of her clones, even though Twice would have been able to with his clones. Now, I don't necessarily buy this explanation for what's going on with Toga and why she can't use the quirk. I mean, I believe that this is the reason in the story, and I believe Horikoshi when he says it, but Horikoshi also very much could have just gone the opposite way, and I feel like it would have been okay, right? Like, it would have made sense if Toga was able to use Twice's quirk. Although in this situation we do have a Toga that seems to be nerfed, I do like the kind of thought that Toga doesn't love the other League of Villains members as much as she loves some of the living heroes, right? And Toga is one of those only characters that really plays between that line of heroes and villains, and I know it doesn't seem like it, but it's more so because Toga wants to be friends with heroes and villains, and she's one of the only characters in the series that we've seen wanting to extend a hand to both of those different sides, no matter what side on that argument that she's in. And in this situation, it's really more blatant than it's ever been before, because the only league member whose quirk she could use, the only one that she loved enough or cared about enough to use their quirk, is gone. So there's nothing really tying her to that group anymore, and despite how Dabi and other people have treated her in the group and how she feels like they're her family, the only living person right now who we can see that Toga is able to use their quirk is Ochako, meaning that Toga actually has more love for the side of the heroes right now than she does for the side of the villains. And I feel like part of this chapter is her coming to terms with that to a certain extent, and at least realizing that she's very out of place, and the things that she thinks she wants might not actually be what she wants. I feel like a lot of this starts to settle in for Ochako, who starts to wonder how Toga must be feeling about this, and we see that Toga is actually really unwell. On the page, we see Toga remembering her conversation with Dabi, a conversation that did take place in our Vigilante Deku meets Toga and Dabi series that we have on the channel that you can check on the card in the top right. But Toga is absolutely distraught, right? Like, she says that she does love Toya and Tamura, but she can't use their powers, so it means that she might not actually necessarily love them after all. And this is something that apparently Toga already knew beforehand because she tested it, but she thought that things would have changed by the time they got into the actual battle. And if this is true, this is really some L planning from All for One, not making sure that one of the key things that you have on your side works. But maybe we could just give the benefit of the doubt and say that Toga actually lied to All for One and said that it was working because she imagined that it would be working by the time the actual battle came along, and that's just an L for the villains in general. But again, Toga Toga is kind of on that side between the heroes and the villains, so honestly her making a mistake in favor of the heroes kind of works here. Toga starts crying, saying that Jin would have been able to do exactly what she's trying to do, wondering why she can't fully become him. And we see a panel where Toga as Twice is really small on the page in a giant kind of 2-page spread of darkness, and text bubbles everywhere are saying eliminate or exterminate the heroes, which is what all the Twice clones have been repeating this entire time in their sort of rage. And I wonder if this is hinting that the actual reason that Toga can't fully make use of Twice's quirk is because in this situation she's doing something very un-Twice-like. Like maybe the way that she's thinking about things or the way that she's handling things isn't necessarily how he would handle them, so that's causing some sort of interference with her quirk. Now as Toga is kind of having this crisis, right, we see every other Twice clone fighting, engaged in battle against the heroes, and on another great double spread page, we see Ochako fighting the Twice clones as she thinks to herself, I always love seeing people happy. That's why I can't ignore your tears. And in the massive crowd of all the Twice clones fighting and everything, there's one single Twice clone that isn't moving. One single Twice clone that can't commit its own heart to joining the villains in this battle against the heroes. And it's in that moment that while she's having this massive battle with all the Twice clones, Ochako turns her head and is able to recognize the Toga dressed as Twice just by her tears and her lack of action. We then cut back to Tokoyami, who we left off on last chapter, and he's still attacking All For One. Hawks tells him to hold on as long as he can until All For One's body is completely gone. Jiro then tells the heroes to attack Dark Shadow to make it stronger. And I don't necessarily remember that being how that works. Like, Dark Shadow gets stronger the more damage that he takes. Why isn't he just number one in the class? And here we see one of the coolest combinations that I think I've seen out of this entire war arc. Cammy apparently can make a night sky for Tokoyami. So she creates an illusion of an aurora night sky and completely blacks out the sky to make it look like it's nighttime with aurora beams and everything flying over them, pretty much making it nighttime for Tokoyami, giving him the full capability of his quirk, further explaining why he was able to pull so much energy out in the last chapter. Now as Inasa tries to chip in and give support with his wind, everything ends up being useless because a huge explosion comes out from where All For One was. And this explosion is massive and does have the kind of boom sound effects that we tend to see when Bakugo uses his quirk, but it seems different, right? It seems like a giant kind of like light-based explosion, more than like an energy, you know, I guess Bakugo style explosion. It's not really like that as far as I can tell. But Dark Shadow was sent back, and All For One says that these strong types are the most annoying to deal with. The types like Deku and All Might, funny enough. And this is where we see that All For One looks much younger now than he did before Dark Shadow's attack. And here we have Rukusu saying he looks almost like a teenager, but in my opinion, I feel like he looks way more like he's in his young 20s. He sort of looks like he has a very similar build to Hawks, and Horikoshi has a very specific way about how he draws characters, and in this instance, it really just kind of looks like Shigaraki with clean skin and short hair or something like that, right? Leading me more to believe that this is All For One in his 20s, and we have still yet to see All For One in his kind of UA high student age as of yet in the series. And I am wondering how much more dangerous he's going to get, or if he's going to just start getting weaker and weaker. But right now, this is more or less where I consider to be prime All For One. I'm sure he was stronger at a certain point in the future as far as muscle mass, but right now he just looks unhinged and crazy. And if he's like 26 or 25 or something like that, I would be really scared because that is his actual prime. All For One attacks the heroes with some sort of black energy tendrils and starts flying away. Some heroes like Inasa try to go after him, but the worst was yet to come as All For One smiles and he sees Gigantomachia on the horizon coming towards him. Now when I saw this, I was like, that's it. The heroes, like, y'all are cooked. Like, we keep doing this weird seesaw back and forth between the heroes getting someone from the past, the villains getting someone, this and that happening, but it really seemed like as soon as I saw this page, uh-oh, that's trouble because everyone here is already gassed. I don't know how you guys are planning on beating Makia. And also, it made me really upset because Makia was in the Kirishima and Mina area, and what happened to them? But this is actually where we see that something very different than what we're expecting happens. All For One gives an order for Makia to destroy the remaining heroes, but then Hawk says the situation is actually much better than it seems. Right, Tsukauchi? And at this moment, Makia throws an entire mountain at All For One. This completely confuses and shocks All For One, and we cut over to the top of Gigantomachia, where the last page shows Kirishima all wounded on the top of Machia's head, shouting, "We're here too, Tokoyami," and right next to Kirishima, we see Shinso using his quirk and his persona cords on his face to control Machia. Now, this is something that we suggested would happen on Twitter, saying that Shinso might actually be a really smart person to use to try to take control of Machia, because if he uses All For One's voice, of course Machia is going to respond at the very least, and I'm sure Shinso would be able to control him. So it's awesome seeing that come to fruition, but my issue more so is that it seems like we kind of just skipped over the entire events of the Kirishima area. Now, I do think there is a chance that next chapter we could flash back to that, but knowing how Horikoshi has been handling the flashbacks lately, it makes me wonder if we're just going to get a short flashback covering exactly what happened there, or if we're now going to cut over there for another like 3 or 4 chapters to see everything that happened. And if we are going to do that, then why show the events out of order by doing this cliffhanger? I don't know, I just feel like there was a better way to handle that, but I can't really complain because I am still enjoying the fact that Kirishima, instead of just defeating Gigantomachia, he's like conquered him and turned him into a legendary like LR mount, like a super rare mount that he could just ride into battle alongside Shinso. So I find that really awesome, but again, that is the end of the chapter. Now, Horikoshi's author comment this week in Shonen Jump is, "The ordinary woman felt plush I got from a fan got attacked by my cat. That was a close call." And that's everything going on of this chapter of My Hero Academia. If you want a further breakdown of the events happening in this chapter and what it might mean in the following weeks, check back on this channel tomorrow, and I'm going to be working on the next My Hero Academia iceberg, so I'll see you guys after, and yeah, peace, love ya, Pineapple, out.